They were on a shore excursion from a Holland America cruise ship that had docked Thursday in Ketchikan. Federal investigators will probe the cause. A New Hampshire hermit who's been living off the land for decades is now homeless.
81-year-old David Lidstone's remote small cabin near the Merrimack River burned down on Wednesday. Lidstone is known to locals as River Dave. He wasn't home at the time of the fire. Lidstone was jailed last month for contempt of court. The cabin was on land owned by a Vermont man who considers River Dave a squatter. Lidstone was told he'd be released if he agreed to leave the cabin. Lidstone told the judge, "You came with your guns, you arrested me, brought me in here, you've got all my possessions, you keep them. I'll sit here with your uniform on until I rot." There are now offers from as far away as California to help River Dave relocate. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Diving and seeing our coral reef full of life.
I really love hiking the trails.
I really love going to the beach. The sunsets are amazing.
Your island needs you. Help preserve what makes our island home. Stop those who threaten our wildlife, plants, and environment. Install the free Toka app and report poaching, littering, burning, and other environmental crimes. Call 864-TOKA or install the free Toka app today. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Department of Agriculture, UOGC Grant, and Choice Broadcasting.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And you tailgaters out there, of course, know that little verse by heart. So you could join me at 4 o'clock tomorrow and 4 o'clock on Sunday for a respectful recitation of the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. And if you do it out loud, then everyone who is nearby will say, "Oh, look, there's a tailgater." Because if you've learned the Second Amendment by heart, you may be a tailgater. Yeah. And if your day really begins at 4 p.m. or 1600, you may be a tailgater, right, Jose?
You are correct, Bob.
And, of course, if you are a tailgater, you know this is the worst day of the week because there's no tall tales on Saturday and Sunday. But Jose and I somehow soldier on through it and get around here back on Monday. Well, let's go to Zemi Ikutni. Our view, we'd like to be done with the pandemic, but the pandemic is not done with us. Now, there's a poetic headline. On Wednesday, the Wuhan virus area risk score went from 1.7 to 3.0. Overnight, there were 30 new cases of Wuhan virus reported, and military bases reinstated a mandatory mask policy. In the news release announcing the mask policy, Joint Region Marianas stated a change was made following an increase in Wuhan virus positive cases among military members, concurrent with an increased operational tempo an influx of temporarily assigned personnel. The temporary assigned personnel, like the British ship, the Queen Elizabeth. If only we could play Rule Britannia for bumper music. Rule Britannia, Britannia rules the way. If we only had that for bumper music, I'm sure the Brits, what do they call them? They call them limeys. Yeah, because they found out that British seamen who were often stricken with scurvy could prevent scurvy by eating limes, vitamin C's. That's why you call a Brit a limey, among other reasons.
Not a slimy.
Not a slimy. Meanwhile, on Guam, a line of people waiting for vaccines stretched along the second floor of Micronesia Mall on Thursday. They will soon join the 103,652 people, more than 62% of Guam's total population, who are fully inoculated against the virus. And we hope none of them will join the more than 8,600 people who have tested positive for Wuhan virus since our first cases were reported in March of last year. We want the Wuhan virus pandemic to be over. We want to get back what we knew as normal before the lockdowns, the sickness, the deaths, the tyranny of the governor. No, it doesn't say that. The roadblocks on Marine Corps Drive. And the economic devastation became part of our daily lives. We want to rip off our masks, hug our friends, and go back to the way things were before "stay safe." It's replaced "see you later" as a routine valediction. I noticed that a lot of people say, "Oh, Bob, stay safe." That means they just don't know me very well. That's the last thing I want to do. We want to be done with this pandemic, but this pandemic is not done with us. On Thursday, Adelaide spokeswoman Crystal Paco San Augustine, formerly known as Crystal Paco, said that in easing restrictions, the governor's office expected an increase in Wuhan virus cases and that officials will monitor the situation. As individuals, we also need to monitor the situation. We have to take personal responsibility for safety. We know that getting vaccinated, washing hands, limiting exposure to others will help prevent the spread of the virus. We also need to remember that everyone in our community is able to get vaccinated. As much as we want the pandemic to be over, it's not. We see it in the waves of infection that have continued to sweep over the nation. Until it's over, we need to stay safe. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. Well, out there, tailgaters, stay safe. Tailgaters, being some of the most intelligent people on the island, have already figured out what they need to do. All right, let's go to the Post. Solutions to the problem with stray dogs abound. There's just no willpower to act. Guam mayors who have been driven to exasperation by Guam's never-ending massive stray dog issue received some criticism for considering an option used in culling wild animals. The option? If stray dogs show aggression and threaten the safety of kids, walkers, runners, and other people in general, mayors or other licensed gun owners in our community could act based on the culling law on wild animals. A depredation permit under the Department of Agriculture allows for the killing of feral or wild animals. The application states specifically that the permit is meant to allow for the killing of deer, pigs, and birds. But the document also allows applicants to disclose the intent to cull other wild animals. This is what some of the island's mayors during the most recent Mayor's Council of Guam meeting discussed as a possible option for keeping the stray dog population under control. If the dog is wild or feral, then it can be included as other, right? And again, all that is subject to the approval of the Director of Agriculture. If we feel that you're able to, and you have the capacity to execute this depredation, then you can collectively or singularly apply for this depredation permit, said Council President Jesse Alec, also known as Smart. Smart Alec. Yeah. The mayor of Petey. Yeah, see Jesse Alec, na familiar and smart, familiar and malati. If the existing Guam law on wild animals is used to cull feral stray dogs, other laws, including those governing the possession and use of firearms to kill the animals covered by the permit, need to be followed, Alex said. See what I mean?
That was smart.
Mm-hmm. For an island of Guam size, 30 miles long and 12 miles wide, with about a third of the land in the hands of the military, the sheer population of stray dogs estimated at 60,000 is a lot. The village mayors get the brunt of the complaints when school children and other pedestrians are threatened on the streets by packs of stray dogs. But they don't have the power to control how GovGuam's overall budget is spent and whether the funding priority includes enough resources to address the problem of stray dogs. While the stray dog issue has not been resolved by gubernatorial administrators past and present, the problem piques mayors' interest each time school children are getting ready for another school year. Part of the problem is no matter how often mayors and the Department of Agriculture round up stray dogs, there's no place to keep them. During the council's monthly meeting held Wednesday, several mayors said their efforts to catch aggressive strays endangering their residents have been delayed because they were told the kennel run by the Guam Animals in Need, also referred to as GAIN, is full. GAIN is a nonprofit organization but gets government funding to accommodate strays. GAIN has done this for a year already. We're not getting any better, and there's a lot of dogs that are roaming the streets. You might say that the problem will tend to multiply as time goes on. And they've attacked kids again, said Paul McDonald, mayor of Agana Heights. School is opening, and it's going to get worse. What are we going to do with GAIN? Well, yeah, I'm missing 2 pages of this editorial, I think. Oh, yeah, I know why, because it was stapled to the Daily News editorial. Alex said he's discussed the insufficient space to house captured stray dogs with lawmakers in the governor's office, but the cause of the problem ultimately is a lack of funding. And because mayors don't control GovGuam purse strings or how GovGuam spending should be prioritized, the mayors are left to consider this extreme, which is to work on a process to cull feral dogs that threaten school children and pedestrians. Many advocates for the proper treatment of stray dogs have said mass spaying and neutering will cause a significant dent in the problem. That solution is not insurmountable. If at least half the stray dogs are sprayed or neutered at a cost of $150, $180 each, that's an investment of $4.5 to $5.4 million for a safer Guam. I just don't see the good politics in this at all. You know, good politics meaning the kind of thing that a politician can advocate, and people say, yeah, that's a good idea, or yeah, I'm glad someone's doing that. And people don't say, I don't think we should be spending our money on that. And that's what's going to happen.
Unless they call it the All Rough Act.
Yeah. 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 So, the senator that stands up and says, I'm going to add a $5 million appropriation here to the Department of Agriculture, so the Director of Agriculture can start a program of capturing, spaying, and neutering dogs and turning them loose. Everybody in the legislature would say, what, you want this body to go to the dogs?
Nope.
Yeah. It's just not the kind of thing that strikes the public's fancy. People don't like to see the stray dogs all over the place. But I don't think anybody's going to want to spend $5 million on dealing with it. That looks like a lot of money, but for a local government with $1 billion annual budget, perhaps the problem isn't about funding. It's a question of whether addressing the problem is a priority over other GovGuam expenses over the years, such as government travel and paying for fiesta food, music, and other pomp and circumstance for a myriad of ribbon cuttings, groundbreakings, and other government-sponsored celebrations, which in Tall Tales lingo is called cookie pushing. Yeah. The government of Guam likes to spend a lot of money on cookie pushing. Also, gain should not be the only GovGuam solution for housing strays. GovGuam has lots of land parcels, and GovGuam has a lot of federal government money for job internships and job skills boot camps. Why not deploy the paid interns and boot camp apprentices to build fences, roofs, and proper drainage over a big swath of public land to hold the strays? Remember my New Deal solution of a couple days ago? Hire people to do at minimum wage to do this kind of work. And why not initiate a bounty system to keep some of the unemployed busy rounding up strays? So you bring two ears of a dog to the Director of Agriculture and she'll give you $10, the bounty system. Someone in GovGuam who has the charisma and authority to take the lead on the issue might need to be designated. Sorry, folks, I'm not going back to the government of Guam. I'm happy right here at Talk Radio. I noticed that you saw some of my qualities, but no thanks. And besides that, I'm really proud of my modesty. Former Governor Carl Gutierrez has been named Tourism, Building Permits, and Economic Development Czar. Lieutenant Governor Joshua Tenorio is taking the lead on island beautification and tackling homelessness. Let's make the Lieutenant Governor the head dog catcher. Can we name a chief problem solver for stray dogs who has the power to enforce solutions and spend adequately carved out funding? Here's another Tall Tales vocabulary word, juice. Juice means having the personal and professional ability to get people to do what they don't want to do and to get them to do what you want them to do. Carl Gutierrez, like him or not, is a classic example of somebody that's got juice. The Guam Ethics Committee is a classic example of a completely juiceless operation. They've been around, they've been appointed now for well over a year, and so far they haven't entertained a single case because, well, we're waiting for this, and we want to do that, and we don't have a building, and on and on and on. There is no shortage of solutions, long and short term, nor is there a shortage of dogs. It's never been about whether there's a way to tackle this massive issue. The question has always been whether elected officials who have authority over the budget have the willpower to do it. And this seems to be a national sport here on Guam. We've known in 1977, An unfortunate patient at the hospital had to make a head call. As he was sitting on a commode, he was electrocuted and died.
Whoa.
Yeah. His heirs were represented by Larry Tecker, Government Claims Act, and the whole thing. So, we knew way back in when you got a problem like that, it kind of tells you maybe your hospital isn't exactly Cedars of Sinai, right? So we've known it, and we keep complaining about it, and we keep having bad experiences, and we keep saying too many employees at the hospital, too many non-medical employees, on and on. But no one has had the juice to actually jump in and do it. We had a guy named Bill, what was his name, who came in and was going to cut loose the people that weren't really necessary at the hospital. He left here with criminal charges pending. Yeah. I can't remember the guy's name. I'm sure.
Was that recent?
Yeah, it was maybe
3 years ago, right?
No, this was about 2004 or 5 back in that days. Yeah, in those days. And this another guy came along who writes for the Guam Daily Post. His name is, I can't remember his name either. And he was fired because there were misuses of credit card, of a government credit card. So, it just seems like when someone comes along and wants to really change things at the hospital mafia just won't stand still for it. And we've seen that, we talk about the hospital, and if there's anything that's important on this island, it's our hospital. And we're still having the same conversations today that we had 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ago. Okay, so much for the Daily News editorial. For the Post edit. That was the Post editorial, wasn't it? And let's see, before I even get into the card, I've got...
No, they just wanted, that was Mark, want to make his mark off the air. Was the person you're talking about the Administrator McMillan?
Yeah, Bill McMillan.
Okay.
Yeah, Bill McMillan, yeah. Yeah, he came in, and he was going to clean up, he was going to cut the staff back to there are national ratios. How many patients, what's your staff should be. He was going to do that. And I don't remember what the pretext was, but he was prosecuted. I think it was a misdemeanor prosecuted. It was ultimately dismissed. But they really wanted him out of here.
So they put a charge up against him. That was the
we don't
allegedly.
We don't know who the they was, and we don't know all the details, but we do know that he left.
Just one quick note on the stray dog problem.
Yeah.
We do have a building in mind.
Okay. You could put thousands of stray dogs on the 19th floor, and they would magically disappear. No one would ever know what happened to them. Did you ever see the movie The Shining, Jose?
That's a good, yeah.
Yeah.
Long time ago.
Yeah, well, that's actually a true story. It actually didn't take place in that mountain resort. It took place in the 19th floor. Okay, I want to just peek at Facebook here for a second before I go into the card. I noticed we got a lot of traffic here. Okay, let's see. I got a man who wants to make his mark. Good afternoon, Mark.
Hi, Uncle Bob. So here's the thing that I'm thinking about the stray dogs. The mayors can round them up, but Gain has no room, so there's nothing they can do. So I'm going to count on your intellect. Where is another place where they can store dogs, animals, whatever you want to call them, that is currently not in use, but it belongs to a private property owner? And is there a way to get around using the facility, maybe even as a donation?
Sounds like you have a location in mind yourself, Mark.
Yeah? Do you know which one I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
Guam Greyhound.
Perfect.
Yeah, they've got, man, they remember they used to keep a bunch of dogs there.
Yeah.
In those kennels.
Well,
so
the
there
name.
must be a way to be able to, yeah.
The name says it.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So maybe someone from Gain or one of the senators needs to reach out to whoever owns that place now, because it was the guy from Saipan. I forgot when he was trying to open the casino.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it escapes me. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if he still owns it or if it belongs to somebody else now. Or
they're using it for bingo right now. But
the main facility, yeah, but they're not using the kennels for anything.
Yeah. Well, that's a great idea. Before you mentioned that, I thought maybe we find just a 10-acre field and put a good.
And let them run free.
And put a good sized fence all the way around it and do an open range concept. Right?
Yeah, well, yeah, that might work until it starts to rain. You'd have to put a bunch of canopies up for them to hide under.
Well, I don't know. You know, dogs they're not amphibians, but they aren't like so many people on this island. 2 drops of rain start to fall and umbrellas are popping all over the place.
Yeah, but, you know, if they're out there getting all wet, you're going to have the SPCA all over your butt.
I suppose. Well, good idea, Mark. Thanks for contributing.
All right. Hopefully someone that has some influence can do something about it.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mark. So we're going to take a short break here, and then I'm going to go to the mat with the next caller.
Starting August 1st, pandemic unemployment assistance claimants must start searching for work to remain eligible for PUA benefits. 3 work searches a week are required. Work searches include registering on HireGuam.com, meeting with employers, submitting resumes and applications, and attending job fairs. Only a few are exempt from the work search requirement. This includes those working reduced hours, those in training programs, and self-employed individuals. Remember, PUA ends September the 4th. Now is the time. Let's rebuild our workforce. For more information, go to dol.guam.gov.
Pastrami is back at Subway. Pepper-crusted beef layered with crispy pickles, mustard, and melted provolone cheese. Nothing comes close to the pleasure of sinking your teeth into that chewy, juicy, well-seasoned pastrami. It's happiness in a sub. Head down to the nearest Subway restaurant and satisfy your craving for the deli perfection that is pastrami. Subway. Eat fresh. Pastrami sub is available to all Subway locations on Guam and Saipan, including NCS, for a limited time only.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Okay, so here we are, and as I said before the break, I have a caller here that I'm going to go to the mat with, right, Matt?
Oh yeah, that's funny.
Are you the same Matt that actually revolutionized my thinking about objectivity in the media?
Well, I hope so. Yes, but there could be other Matthews. It is a common Christian name.
It is indeed. Yeah, I recognize your voice. That was quite a service that you did for me, Matt, when we talked about the media, bias, lack of objectivity, etc. And I'm still very critical of the media, but I almost always mention your name and what I might refer to as Matt's precepts as I go into that discussion. So now we're going from something kind of cerebral talking about media objectivity, et cetera. Now we're going to go to the dogs, Matt. So what can you tell me about dogs?
Well, thank you for those kind words. You are a scholar and a gentleman. And the only time that I was on NPR as a radio caller, the topic was feral dogs and feral cats, or feral animals in general. And what the discussion was that it's interesting that certain government types or municipalities or different areas that are managed by the government for services, including removal of feral animals, allow certain animals to run free and other animals to be culled. Now on Guam, we're going to have this pig hunt where we take the meat and provide it to folks in need or folks that are interested. At the same time, we have the same problem with dogs. The topic for the NPR call was about San Diego. In San Diego, California, you will never see a feral dog. But as soon as you cross the border into Baja, Mexico, there's feral dogs everywhere, but you see no cats. There's certainly something about people that live in a certain region or a government type that allows certain feral animals to run free. So what says you about why the government of Guam seems to have a challenge with feral dogs?
Well, here I've kind of thought about that myself and examined my own feelings. You know, people, you could probably divide humans into two categories, cat people and dog people. And the difference is that a cat wants to show you who's boss, but a dog just wants to be your friend. And I think humans, unless they're cat people, have a natural affinity for dogs, and the idea of anything bad happening to dogs is something that doesn't sit very well with most people. So when people see friendly stray dogs, which is most stray dogs, they just have this affinity for them, and so many people feed them and just make the problem worse. So when it comes to the government, you shorten this up to one sentence, and that is that probably an awful lot of people on this island just don't have the heart to go out and do something that would be unfriendly towards dogs. They would rather tolerate the loose dogs in the neighborhood than cull the herd or something like that, Matt.
Yeah, that tolerance definitely is the reason why we're having this discussion, because at some point, the feral animal being the dog, there's too many of them. So obviously the issues with gain and availability for adoption are slim on the island. So it seems one solution is culling the dogs. Now, yes, people have heartstrings attached to certain animals. I'll have to somewhat disagree. I think people have the same heartstrings attached to cats, but cats are a little more elusive. You know, they don't just hang out in the open in big packs like dogs do. So I think there are a lot of cats out there as well, but dogs are a little bit more brazen on this island. But, likely the only solution is to remove some of the dogs through a cull process. But that's a difficult political avenue because of people's heartstrings.
Exactly, Matt. So I guess what we're going to have to do then is start a little education campaign to let people understand that what may seem to be kindness for the dogs maybe isn't so kind after all. Having 60,000 dogs running loose on this island isn't the best thing that you could do for the species.
Is that the number? Wow.
Yeah.
60,000. Jeez.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well.
Yeah. Spay and neuter. There's not enough spay and neuter to answer the problem either. So, unfortunately, a cull may be one way to address the issue, but that's only a temporary solution. The same issue will crop up, years down years down the road, despite any call that would be put in place.
We only have one dog catcher at the Department of Agriculture right now. Can you imagine that?
Well, he has job security.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
He sure does. Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, we'll keep dogging this issue, Matt. My gosh, we'll find a solution somewhere.
Sounds good. Thanks for taking my call.
Good talking to you again, Matt. Yeah.
He kind of emphasized what we were talking about yesterday of the different areas, just in the United States alone, where dog, the treatment of dogs or the way that the mindset is different region to region.
Sure.
Most definitely.
Yeah, you mentioned that yesterday. Yeah, so here I think we go overboard with being kind to dogs, being kind to animals. So let me see here. I was going to go through the Facebook comments. I got somebody else coming in. Somebody on the line. No. Okay, so Facebook comments. We start out and we got Nate horning in, and he makes a big deal. Nate says, guess what, tailgaters? It's Friday. You know, he's rubbing it in. We don't like Friday. My response was, sorry, tailgaters, last show of the week. Yeah, it's going to be tough on Jose and I, but by gosh, we'll make it. Rico Blancafor is here, and let's see, Nate horning in again. Gain needs to double up in size. More staff means more jobs. Unfortunately, Nate, Gain is a nonprofit, so they don't have an unlimited supply of money as though it were a government agency. And then Vince Mesa says we got stray people, too. I don't think we're going to be able to get around to culling them.
Cannot do that.
No. And let's see, Sherry Uriarte is here. Nate Horn, there will always be haters, to quote Mrs. Swift. Haters going to hate. Yeah, and that word has taken on an entirely new meaning. A hater is someone who disagrees with wokeism. That is a hater. If I were to say, in fact, I'm going to say it, okay? I don't care how you package it or what euphemisms you use or how slick you think you are. A marriage is one man and one woman. And there aren't going to be very many woke people listening, but if there are, they're all saying, yeah, haters gonna hate. Okay. And Pam Duvall is here. And let's see, Nate Horn is wishing Pam a happy birthday. If it's her birthday, happy birthday, Pam. Yeah, and Peter Santos, Biba Betness, all you tailgaters. Ah, yeah, lie. Baba Betness, Toduna tailgaters. And let's see, we've got Pam Duvall again. How about gutting out buses and stack cages in it? Hire 2 guys per truck. Give them tranquilizer guns, get the dogs in the bus, and bring them to a shelter. Gain is inadequate for a large number of strays. Build it, they will come. Oh, that's a catchy phrase. I'll bet you a Hollywood screenwriter would pay to get a hold of that phrase. And Nate horns in again. How about we decrease the mayors down to 3 or 4 and use the extra funds to pay the salary of another vet at Gain and fund grants that will pay for a new or additional shelter for spaying, neutering. Yeah, that's keep staying with animals. That's killing 2 birds with 1 stone, isn't it? Pam Duvall, the dog catcher should have 2-way radio so they can be tracked. No chance of hanging out at a party's ranch for 2 or more lunch hour breaks. That would be stray dog catchers. And then we could use the Verona Resort for strays, that empty hotel. Pam Duvall, just turn on their phone or GPS or activate the Island Mother's coconut connection. And Donna Mila into Titano. Notice how there are no strays on the bases, so they have a secret control measure that can be implemented.
Collate.
Mm-hmm. Tom Mendiola, why just neuter and release? Same neutered dog can also attack people. Euthanasia is the only solution. Well, culling is a form of euthanasia, isn't it? I just have a feeling that if we started down that road, you know, the local chapter of PETA, P-E-T-A, the anti-cockfighting guy, and all kinds of do-gooders all over the island would just come up. There would be more of them roaming around than stray dogs.
We need a catcher for them.
Yeah. Elwin Champaco Quetano. The dogs, there must be a large field out there that have hundreds of empty fighting rooster huts. Yes, free roaming dogs would work. That was my idea. Free open range dogs, right? Tom Mendiola, they can also also pass on the heartworm and other diseases. A little biological culling. Eric Harper, the base has a full-time animal control officer. Now, boy, there's a military career for you. I can just imagine someone whose son comes home from the Air Force and the proud parents say, my son, Captain Jones is coming home on leave from the Air Force today. Oh, your son is an officer? What does he do in the Air Force? He's an animal control officer. Whoa, that's heavy duty. Yeah. And let's see. Nate Horn, as a cat person, I concur. My cats constantly remind me who's boss at my place. Donna Mila into Titano, open up the dog meat market. There's another one that gets down to a relatively difficult to articulate but deeply held sentiment. I just can't imagine myself eating a dog. But if you analyze it, if you follow the science, a dog is probably a hell of a lot more healthy to eat than a pig or a cow. Dogs are relatively clean animals, right? It's the same way with horses. You know, we don't eat horses in the United States. And from time to time, there will be a little scandal that comes along. An XYZ company was mixing horse meat with their hamburger. And it's just not a good thing to have said about your company. Colin Clark, there are people on my street that just let their dogs breed and don't feed them, so they roam. And let's see. Okay, I got somebody on the line here. It would be, I got two. I got Mark wanting to make his mark and Dave chiming in on the dog issue. Okay, Mark wants to talk about marriage. Go for it, Mark.
Well, first off, I want to take exception with Matt's assertion that cats are more elusive. All you need is a good cage and a laser pointer, and you can get them to go where you want.
Okay, well, lessons learned.
And on marriage, that's the one thing. I've had this argument before with people who are, woke. And I said, where did the word marriage come from? And they thought about it, and then they realized, yeah, it came from the Bible. Okay, there. If marriage is in the Bible and it says it's between a man and a woman, then that's what it is. If you want to have a union or whatever other word you want to call it, with all the privileges that are given to a married couple, man and wife, that's fine too. But for them to hijack the word and use it that way, it just never sat well with me.
Well, I got to give you a tip about arguing with wokesters, Mark. This would be an affirmative argument coming from a wokester. We should never use the word marriage. You know why?
Why?
Because it's mentioned in the Bible. Therefore, you know it's wrong.
Okay, well, the other thing I wanted to mention was I just saw another aircraft, a different aircraft in the sky. The V-22 Osprey tilt rotor just flew by me here in Tamuni.
Oh, okay. Well,
So the marine version of the heavy lift attack helicopter or heavy lift attack airplane.
Yeah. Well, then I guess sooner or later it will put down, and then we can say the Marines have landed and the situation is well in hand. Right, Mark?
Anytime Marines land anywhere, the situation is well in hand.
Good call, Mark. Good. Thanks for calling in again. We had a caller. Did you lose him? He got tired of waiting? Who was it?
That was
Dave.
Dave, yes.
Yeah.
Want to talk about dogs.
Oh, okay. Well, call back, Dave. I want to hear what you have to say about dogs. So, short break here before we get up to the halftime show.
Top End Pest Control is who you call for all your pest control needs. Got a problem with roaches, ants, spiders, rodents, fleas, ticks, termites? No problem. They do it all. Top End Pest Control is a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business and HubZone certified, serving Guam since 2012. Call them today for a quote, 487-5657, or email topendpest@gmail.com. Check them out on Facebook at Top End Pest Control and give them a like. Top End Pest Control for all your pest control needs. Now on Guam. 511 Tactical, offering the largest selection of tactical apparel and gear for law enforcement, first responders, tactical operators, and recreational enthusiasts. We're located next to Bargain Tactical, Guam's largest firearms dealer. Find both stores, Route 16 Army Drive between the Dungeon and Little Langs. Open Monday through Friday, 10 to 7, Saturdays 10 to 5, and closed on Sunday. Visit us online at tacticalgearguam.com. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Tactical Gear Guam. 511 Tactical, now on Guam. Always be ready.
Okay, so here we go again. I'm still looking at Facebook. Pam Duvall says, Bob, I'm so glad my parents were straight. Yeah, and I have the same feeling, Pam, and I'll tell you something else I'm glad about, and that is that my mother didn't understand about a woman's right to choose. Think of how different my life would be had my mother embraced that.
You wouldn't have that life.
I wouldn't have a life, would I? Yeah. Okay, let's see. Tom Mendiola, stray dogs might have rabies. Declare a public health emergency. I could use another stimulus check. And Sandra Regis is the last poster here. She says she's sorry she's late. Well, I can understand being sorry, Sandra. Not that it's necessary to apologize to anyone, any of us tailgaters here. The sorry part would be because you've missed, almost a whole hour of Tall Tales, and that would be enough to cause anyone to be sorry to have missed that much of a Tall Tales episode in a particular day. Okay, let's take a look and see what we've got on the card this afternoon. And I've got AG versus, wait a minute, I've got still more Tall Tales versus Melvin Bora. You got to make sure you listen to that. I'll read the letter that I got back from Melvin Wanpat in response to my notice to the commission telling them that Melvin violated the law. Then we've got AG versus Kepco. This deals with what happened at Marble Cave, etc. And once again, we're going to have to turn on the Law and Order notebooks here because I'm going to have to go into a doctrine in water law that will strike you as zany. It's called the common enemy doctrine. And then after that, I've got the people versus wise owl, governor versus Therese, as you were governor versus Therese, then the people versus wise owl, people versus Bessiou, which I haven't had a chance to get to yet, Tall Tales versus Rapinoe, which I've labeled Benetsu, Cuomo versus hypocrisy, Progressive versus the United States, Turley versus Biden, Cori Bush versus the McCloskeys. You remember the McCloskeys? The couple in St. Louis were at
Bonnie
home,
and Clyde
were at home minding their own business, and this group of Black Lives Matter broke into a private compound and were standing on their front lawn menacing them. So Bonnie and Clyde came out. Bonnie had a pistol, and Clyde, I think, had an AR-15.
It was some sort of Twilight Zone episode.
It was.
It's really mirror universe.
Yeah. So they were just saying, hey, folks, don't get any ideas. You're not going to trash our house. So ultimately, the cops came and arrested the McCloskeys, not the rioters.
Say what?
And the superintendent, as you were the district attorney for that county, prosecuted them. No! Yeah. And you'll find out when we get to that item on the card, it's one of the few people she prosecuted. And they pled guilty to, they plea bargained down and pled guilty to a misdemeanor, and then the governor of Missouri pardoned them. So I suppose this was all put together, you know. The governor says, hey, I want to pardon you guys. Do yourself a favor, cut a deal for a misdemeanor, you'll get pardoned the next day. Smart move on the governor's part, because I suspect that 95% of the people in Missouri are on the side of the McCloskeys. The other 5% are Black Lives Matter. They're not going to support him anyhow, so what difference does it make, right? And then I've got academia versus the folks and eco-fascists versus freedom. So I could just start, I guess, here with, it's on the card, is still more Tall Tales versus Wonpat. And by way of background, you remember what happened. I gave a speech at the Rotary Club. I laid out much of the same, probably everything that you've heard here on Tall Tales more than once, that self-determination is not a synonym for decolonization. We all live in a colony. There's no reason that since it affects us all, that we shouldn't all be involved. That the separatists run that commission, which should be called the Commission for Chamorro Independence. That and I named a couple of names: Michael Bavacqua and let's see, Laura Sauder, as some of the leaders in the separatist movement mentioned that I favored the situation we're in right now, and I gave a short explanation. So a couple days after that, a press release came out on the letterhead of the Commission for Self-Determination. And the signature line on that letterhead was, Commission on Decolonization addresses and corrects misleading, uninformed remarks on decolonization and self-determination. So I was wondering, wow, the commission had a meeting. It must have been an emergency special meeting to get this out so shortly after my speech to the Rotary, and to actually get it, put it together, and then approve it, and then publish it. So, as is my usual custom, when I have a question like that, I send a sunshine law request. And I demanded let's see what exactly I demanded. I demanded the call, notice, and minutes of the meeting wherein the commission approved the text and authorized the transmittal of the press release, which was the subject of PSC news article on July 26th. Okay, let's come back to this right after the big halftime show. And I'll read Melvin Wampat's letter.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Amendments slow down the infrastructure bill. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. An attempt in the U.S. Senate to end debate and move to a final vote on the infrastructure package failed last night as more potential amendments were introduced. Senate Majority Leader Schumer says they'll be back at it at noon Saturday. Meanwhile, a government agency says the bill will add to the federal deficit.
The Congressional Budget Office finds on net the bipartisan infrastructure agreement would add $256 billion in projected deficits over the next 10 years. Negotiators have said the $1.2 trillion measure is fully paid for, including through economic expansion from new transportation projects. The CBO projects increased revenues of $50 billion and direct spending cuts of $110 billion. But discretionary spending would increase by more than $400 billion.
Fox's Jared Halpern. Later this morning, the Labor Department will report on July's job numbers. A survey of economists predicts they'll show a burst of job growth. Just weeks before the school bells ring, school districts are desperate for bus drivers.
As many as 44 states from coast to coast are reporting serious shortages. Individual districts say they already had a challenge pre-COVID, but after the pandemic, it's all hands on deck. Candidates must have a CDL or commercial driver's license. They also have to be trained on various routes, have an ability to connect with kids, and they must be able to pass an initial drug test and random tests while on the job. With close to 20 states now having legalized marijuana, officials say it's hard to recruit viable drivers.
Fox's Anita Vogel. 3 volcanoes are erupting in Alaska, one spewing lava, the other 2 steam and ash. No threat so far to any of the small communities nearby. Wall Street up Thursday. The Dow added 271 points. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Investigators for the New York State Assembly have given Governor Andrew Cuomo until next Friday to submit evidence in his defense against impeachment proceedings, which are moving quickly.
The political heat rising Thursday as the New York State Assembly's Judiciary Committee wrote in a letter to Cuomo's lawyers, quote, "The committee's investigation is nearing completion, and the Assembly will soon consider potential articles of impeachment against your client." The New York Post reporting Cuomo is at the governor's mansion working on how to next respond to the Attorney General's report, which found he sexually harassed 11 female staffers and state workers. Meanwhile, the first woman to publicly accuse the governor, Lindsey Boylan, is filing the first civil lawsuit against him for retaliation.
Fox's Laura Engel. The Justice Department has begun an investigation of the Phoenix, Arizona Police Department to determine if it has a pattern of using force excessively.
The investigation will determine whether the Phoenix Police Department engages in a pattern or practice of violations of the Constitution or federal law.
Attorney General Merrick Garland, the Federal Aviation Administration, asking airports to help them crack down on misbehaving airline passengers.
The regulator's administrator, Stephen Dixon, told airport officials disruptive passengers should be held accountable, not just questioned and released once the plane lands. The FAA cannot file criminal charges, so Dixon suggests civil fines. He also asks merchants to limit alcohol sales to people waiting to fly. So far, the FAA says more than 3,700 incidents of unruly passengers have been documented this year, mostly involving face mask requirements. A major flight attendants union is pushing for criminal charges against those who assault its members on planes. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Pastrami is back at Subway. Pepper-crusted beef layered with crispy pickles, mustard, and melted provolone cheese. Nothing comes close to the pleasure of sinking your teeth into that chewy, juicy, well-seasoned pastrami. It's happiness in a sub. Head down to the nearest Subway restaurant and satisfy your craving for the deli perfection that is pastrami. Subway. Eat fresh. Pastrami sub is available to all Subway locations on Guam and Saipan, including NCS, for limited time only.
So here we are back again, Tall Tales, big halftime show that we all like so much. That means that we are now in the second half, the last half of Tall Tales for this week. Yeah, but I've got something that will help you over the weekend. Just don't let me forget it at the end of the show. Jose?
Oh, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
To get us through.
Yeah, just to kind of hold back those cravings, you know. So I sent that FOIA asking for those papers to Melvin Bora, and I got an answer back. And when I, with respect to the call, notice, minutes of the meeting, et cetera, the response was no meeting was called for the formulation of a response. So that means that snotty press release that Melvin Bora sent out was not, perhaps wasn't even seen by the commissioners. They probably read about it in the newspaper. So based on that, I downloaded the Nasty Letter software in my computer and wrote a letter pointing out that Melvin Borah was acting ultra-virus, his position as executive director. Ultra-virus means outside his authority.
Oh, it's not another variant of Wuhan?
Someday it probably will be. What's wrong? You look kind of sickly. Well, I've got the ultra-virus. Yeah. And then it was misleading because the way it went out on commission letterhead, etc. Anybody who read it would have thought this was approved by the commission. And then I also pointed out that there was a violation of the open government law because what started it off was there was a call from a reporter from PNC News, as it were an email, and he wanted to interview 3 of the commissioners. The commissioners that are the Statehood, Free Association, and Independence commissioners. So instead of Wonpat saying, well, here's their phone numbers and email addresses, he could have done that. He polled them. That is, that he had one of his tentagos named Suba send emails out saying, we got this request, you guys want to comment, etc. And Michael Bavacqua led the pack, saying, I talked to Adrian Cruz, another one of the commissioners, and he thought that it would be better if the commission responded rather than the individual commissioners. So Bavacqua suggested that to Wonpat, which is exactly what he did. Well, if you followed the continuing saga of the Consolidated Commission on Utilities and their open government law violations, you'd know that you can't do that. You can't poll the members of a commission. In fact, members of the commission shouldn't even discuss commission business outside of a commission meeting. So what Wonpat sent me in response to my FOIA was basically a confession and a smoking gun. We broke the law, and here's how we did it, etc. So and I sent a snotty letter to him about that. Now, is your horn working, Jose?
It's fully functional.
Check it out. Yeah, okay. So here's the letter I got from Melvin Wonpat concerning the letter that I sent to him. Dear Bob, thank you very much for calling to my attention the problems with the press release that I sent out. I had to look up the word ultra-virus in the dictionary because it's not part of my regular vocabulary, but when I did, I found out that ultra-virus means a public official acting outside the scope of his authority. So I'm really glad that you pointed that out to me, Bob, because until you did, I thought that I could just use my position as executive director of the Self-Determination Commission as a soapbox to broadcast my own ideas as though they come from the commission. So thanks for pointing out to me that when I do that, I'm acting ultra-virus. And also, I want to thank you for the education on the open government law. We do have 11 commissioners on the Self-Determination Commission, and we do have meetings from time to time. But it's so much easier for me if I want to do something to just poll them outside of a meeting. Just have Ms. Suba send an email to each one of them and find out what they want to do. And then I just act on that instead of having to call a meeting, et cetera. And again, Bob, I really want to thank you for pointing out to me that doing that is a violation of the open government law. And that part of your letter where you pointed out that knowingly violating the open government law is a misdemeanor, that's helpful too. But of course, it's made my life a little more difficult because I can no longer plead ignorance of the open government law. Although I could have put on a strong case for ignorance before I got your letter. So I can see I've got to do a lot of changing here, Bob. So as far as that press release is concerned, I'm going to ask the commission at the next meeting to make it clear that that was not their press release, that it was my press release, and that they've thoroughly spanked me for sending it out without their approval. So I sign off here, Bob. Yours for good government, Melvin Wanpat. Wasn't that a great letter? Do you think that was a good letter, Jose?
It's an outrageous letter, but if you found that outrageous, they already did it.
Yeah.
Every single thing in that letter.
I thought it was a really good letter. There's only one thing wrong with the letter.
Oh, what's wrong with the letter?
He didn't write it.
Oh.
I made it all up. But it was really easy for I don't want high marks for creativity on this one, Jose. It was really easy because it's exactly what he should say in a letter. There's just no getting around it. But of course, understanding the law of perverse certainties, I'm certain that that's not what he's going to say. If he says anything, he will come back and say, well, he'll go kind of that hater's going to hate type thing. Well, you just don't, you don't understand self-determination. So how could you possibly understand how our commission works, right? Playing that card.
Oh, I hope that would be said.
Yeah. Well, anything that's good for talk radio can't be all bad. Okay, so that's, I suppose I'll be picking this one up again on Monday. Next item on the card is the People versus Wise Owl. And this is a case that dragged on for a long, long time. Wise Owl is Dr. Joel Joseph. He is a veterinarian. He was involved in an extremely controversial relationship with the Board of Allied Health Examiners. They did a search on his place. They were going to deny his controlled substances permit, et cetera. The papers were full of it back in 2013, back in that era. And he sued Ben Abrams, who was a lawyer at the Attorney General's office. And let's see, who else did he sue? Yeah, I guess. Yeah, he sued Ben Abrams, an assistant attorney general, James Gillen, who was the director of public health at the time, Thomas Nadeau, the head of the public health environmental health division, and Rosanna Rabago, who was identified as an environmental health officer. So, he tried the case in the newspaper several times. And you would have thought that, after all of the things he said, all of the criticism of these government officials, that it would have been a slam dunk once he got to a jury. One of the things that I thought was pretty interesting was that Patrick Saville, who represented Gillen, Nadeau, and Rabago, but not Ben Abrams. The government refused to represent Ben Abrams or to provide counsel for him. So Ben had to represent himself. He's a pretty good lawyer, so I guess it worked out. And here's a quote. Did you hear what he said? He wants punitive damages, Seville exclaimed, referring to Joseph. The man who sits there without a sense of shame and tells you that he brings in illegal date rape drugs and he wants to punish my clients. Not on my watch, Pat Seville said. Yeah. The next paragraph. According to court documents, Guam Territorial Veterinarian, you know who that is, Dr. Thomas Poole, testified that based on his review of items seized during a search of Joseph's clinic in May 2015, Joseph possessed ketamine and ketamil. Ketamil was the Australian version of ketamine, not approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. According to a motion for judgment, Poole testified that it was illegal to import ketamil into Guam, and because it was inexpensive to purchase the FDA-approved ketamine, there was concern that the reason for getting it from Australia was to get around controlled substances laws, as ketamil could not be tracked. Poole also testified that ketamil was known as a date rape drug. So it's really good that I talked about the editorial first, and now we've got date rape drugs. No wonder we got 60,000 stray drugs running around here. If we had a veterinarian that was giving them date rape drugs. So that case is over, and I understand the jury was out for about 3 hours. Yeah. And they were back.
That's pretty quick in jury times, huh?
Yeah, and the standard analysis is that the faster the jury comes back, the better chance for a guilty verdict. The longer the jury is out, the better the chance for an acquittal or a hung jury. Next on my card here is the Attorney General versus KEPCO. And I can imagine that Clint Ridgell will be cranking out abundance of press releases on this because he was against KEPCO from the get-go. According to Clint, KEPCO was responsible for the blow-up of the two Cabras power plants. And then if Clint had his way, I would turn off my lights on the way out here, turn off the lights in the studio, and tomorrow it would be solar power that was lighting the room. Everything would go solar tomorrow, and we wouldn't burn a drop of oil after tomorrow. So he, on the one hand, is a solar power guy. On the other hand, he's not much of a KEPCO guy. He's a mild environmental fascist, but I suspect that Sabina Paris will have a field day with this, as will Kelly Marsh Titano, who's no longer in the legislature. But I suspect all three of them will say, I put in my petition for a writ of I told you so way back from the get-go. And now I want my writ of I told you so granted. I want a big piece of paper that says Clint and Sabina and Kelly told us this was going to happen. So here's the article that ran in the Post. The Guam Attorney General's office has sued the developer of a 60-megawatt solar farm and its construction contractor, alleging they failed to follow requirements for erosion control and caused damage to a Guam underground drinking water source in Sausagen Valley, and to historic Marble Cave. Erosion and mud flow turned Marble Cave waters from crystal clear to cloudy brown after recent rains. The AG's office alleges in the lawsuit filed Thursday in the Superior Court that the project's conditions for erosion control were not implemented fully. In the complaint, Attorney General Levin Camacho asked the Superior Court to award damages and punitive damages against KEPCO and Samsung EC America for damaging Guam's natural resources and creating a public nuisance. Well, I read the complaint. It's a 6-page complaint, and they are praying for punitive damages, but I didn't see anything in the complaint that a judge could hang his hat on as far as awarding punitive damages. And my sense is I think the AG is going to be pretty lucky to prevail on this case for reasons I'll mention before we leave. In 2017, Guam Power Authority selected KEPCO to build a 60-megawatt solar farm. The developer would then sell the solar energy it would produce to GPA for about $340 million for over 25 years. They're not selling the power to GPA for $340 million. They're selling the plant. The power agency also awarded KEPCO a separate contract to develop the 198-megawatt power plant in Datado that the project has been estimated to cost $560 million. The environmental lawsuit is the first action of its kind taken by the local AG's office in recent history. The office stated in a press release. I think probably not only recent history, ever. And continuing, there's a little backslapping here, and continuing to deliver on our promise to protect our environment, blah, 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 Attorney General said. The complaint in the Superior Court alleges defendants knew the project was located and remains within the groundwater recharge area of Guam's aquifer and watershed that supplies 80% of the island's drinking water. Permits issued by the Department of Public Works and Guam Environmental Protection Agency required the defendants to submit an approved erosion and sediment control plan, which contained erosion control measures, including the construction of 5 ponding basins and the implementation of other measures before starting earthwork. Guam Environmental Protection Agency representative recently found out the defendants had, quote, failed to fully implement the erosion control measures they agreed to undertake. As a result of defendants' failures, there was a significant discharge of runoff and sediment from the project site onto adjoining properties, including freshwater Marble Cave, as well as into the ocean. Now remember that. As a result of defendants' failures, there was a significant discharge of runoff and sediment from project site onto adjoining properties. EPA issued a notice of violation. The agency then issued a proposed penalty of $125,000, which is the maximum fine that can be assessed under Guam regs, although the fines for the total amount of violations totaled $18 million. When the administrative remedies available to EPA may not be enough to make up for the harm that's been done, we will partner with them to file suit and protect the invaluable resources of our island. This guy ought to be the press agent for his office, not the Attorney General. GEPA Administrator Walter Leon Guerrero said, "We're pleased with AG Levin Camacho and his decision to file suit against those responsible for causing the devastation at Marble. AG Camacho and his office have a proven track record in providing justice to our island." I almost need my anti-emetic here. And given his office success with the ORDOT dump case, the recent opioid settlement, and the work that continues with the PFAS multi-district litigation, our agency is confident in his advocacy toward protecting human and environmental health. Okay, the defendants have 20 days after they're served to respond to the lawsuit. I suspect they'll be filing a motion to dismiss, and I'll get into that in a second. And the matter is going to be handled by Deputy Attorney General Fred Nishihara and Assistant Attorney General Joseph Paris for the Attorney General's office. So I've got the statute dealing with nuisance, and an action may be brought by any person whose property is injuriously affected or whose personal enjoyment is lessened by a nuisance as the same as defined in 20 GCA remedies, and by a judgment in such action the nuisance may be enjoined or abated as well as damages recovered. A civil action may be brought in the name of the government of Guam to abate a public nuisance as the same as defined in 20 GCA by the Attorney General. So the test is whose property injuriously affected or whose personal enjoyment of the property is lessened by the nuisance. And let's see, the Attorney General cites that statute in his complaint. He also cites 20 GCA Chapter 11, which says a public nuisance may be abated by any public body or officer authorized by law, and that's about it. So our law on public nuisance is somewhat slim. An injunction will lie. The Attorney General has played for an injunction. I'm going to go to Wrigley Field and we'll come right back to this.
Hey, big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community. Get national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Mezcla, read all about it. Check out Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tuman for lunch. Serving up some savory seafood specials such as spicy garlic shrimp, candied salmon, or better yet, the local favorite, snapper or shrimp escabeche, available only during lunch hours. Make sure to come down and try these tasty specials and more. Call 969-2652 for more info or to make a reservation. Located at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tuman, Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Okay, so here we are back again on Tall Tales. So apparently what happened was that because of the earth moving that KEPCO did, or KEPCO's construction company did, in the process of building this farm, they changed the topography so that when we had a heavy rain, the surface water washed into Marble Cave, and it took stones and rocks and debris with it, etc. Now, I promised at the beginning of the show that we'd turn on our Law and Order notebooks because I was going to talk about the doctrine called the common enemy, which is a doctrine in water law, which I know a little bit about because I went to law school in New Mexico, and they have water law courses there because there ain't much water in New Mexico. So they've got a body of law. And in New Mexico, even though there isn't a lot of rain, you know, for instance, if you catch water if you have a catchment device that catches rainwater that falls on your roof, that's regulated. Yeah.
They got to pay for that.
Yeah. So even though there isn't much of it, when it rains, it can have really disastrous consequences. Flash floods, these arroyos. You know, when I first got there, started law school, you know, I'd see all these arroyos around, and I'd say, wow, Patty's really got a lot of relatives in New Mexico. So the water comes rushing down these arroyos and floods and everything. So a city like Albuquerque has a very extensive system of drainage canals that are paved, et cetera. And, you know, most of the year, kids go skateboarding in them. But when it rains, it really, the water really washes down. So the common enemy doctrine is a common law doctrine that developed over probably the last 500 years, and it deals with surface water and people's dealing with the water. And this is an article that I found in a publication called DSV Law. And the title of the article is, Wait, My Neighbor Can Do What? And it's by Scott Fisher, the perfect guy to write a letter about water law, right? With the current construction activity in high gear, this author has been contacted several times in regard to runoff that has caused damage to neighboring properties. That's what we're dealing with. Invariably, the situation centers around a construction project which has altered the pre-existing shape of a parcel of property. Such alterations often include raising the elevation of the property to conform to code or for aesthetic design purposes. Whether during construction or after construction is completed, the adjoining landowner complains of runoff that damages the adjoining landowner's property. This damage could include something as simple as erosion or as severe as damage to hardscape and structures through undercutting and subsidence. Also, invariably, the adjacent damaged owner believes it has a claim against its neighbor for trespass, negligence, or a myriad of other creative causes of action. Seems fair, doesn't it? Seems right. If I own Whiteacre and the owner of Blackacre gets in there with a scraper and a grader and a backhoe and changes the elevation of his property, so the next time we have one of these really heavy rainstorms, the water, instead of percolating as it used to or flowing the other direction, now flows into my property and knocks down my chicken coop. That I should be able to sue for that, right? First,
you should.
Yeah.
Maybe.
First of all, the government ought to do something about that, and if not, by gosh, I'll sue. All right. The damaged landowner may in fact have a claim, but more often than not, its neighbor will be able to invoke what has become known as the common enemy doctrine. In its most simplistic and pure form, the common enemy doctrine declares that surface water that does not flow in defined channels is a common enemy, and that each landowner may deal with it in such a manner as best suits his own convenience. Such sanctioned dealings include walling the water in or out, diverting it, or accelerating its flow by any means. However, a landowner cannot collect or concentrate surface water and cast it in a body on his neighbor. Under the doctrine, it's not unlawful for a landowner to accelerate or increase the flow of surface water by limiting or eliminating ground absorption or changing the grade of the land, even if it causes water to stand in unusual quantities or flows in other directions than the water did before. The common enemy doctrine applies only to surface water and not to a natural water course like a river or creek. Surface water is defined as water generally originating from rain or melting snow, which is diffused over the natural slope of the ground, not following a course or channel. Bringing us back to construction projects, the aggrieved landowner often complains of the erection of structures including their attendant downspouts and drainage systems and paving of parking areas. These improvements have necessarily caused more water to flow onto the adjoining property than previously had occurred. Such was the case in Argelian versus Haviland. In Indiana, Supreme Court looked at the common enemy doctrine as it related to an improvement to land which caused a change in the way water runoff affected its neighboring property. In that case, the aggrieved landowner claimed the construction of a commercial building and paving for parking caused damages to her adjacent property. The court agreed that that may have been the case, but that the common enemy doctrine prevented any recovery on the part of the alleged landowner. As long as the adjoining landowner was not channeling water onto its neighbor's land, and by allowing it to diffuse and flow naturally toward the neighbor, the common enemy doctrine protected the defendant. The court recognized that although the common enemy doctrine may at times inflict hardships, it's equally hard on everyone and can benefit at times or burden at times. Our appellate court reaffirmed the common enemy doctrine in a case called Hatton Trust versus Young. In Hatton Trust, the Youngs built a home on a lake in Whitley County, adjacent to land owned by the trust. In constructing the house, the Youngs built a home higher up the hillside from the trust home and raised the elevation of the home approximately 6 feet higher than the existing ground. Chaos ensued during heavy rains when water would travel from the Youngs' property onto the trust property and undermine and damage sidewalks and stairs on its way to the lake. This runoff also carried fill dirt, including rocks, mud, and sediment along the way and ultimately left it on the trust property. So all sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? In affirming the trial court, the appellate court noted there was no evidence that the Youngs were collecting the surface water and casting it upon the trust property. Young's construction only altered the flow of the surface water, an entirely permissible act under the common enemy doctrine. Even though the runoff ran a greater velocity than before due to the higher elevation, this too was permissible. The trust also argued the presence and quantity of mud, rocks, and sediment in the runoff pushed it outside what is permissible as surface water for purposes of the common enemy doctrine. On this issue, the appellate court noted that the presence and quantity of mud, rocks, and sediment was a determination for the trial court. In layman's terms, it is a question of degree which has to be presented either to the judge or jury as the case may be. Since the judge determined at trial at the trial court level that everything coming off the Young's property was indeed surface water, the appellate court determined it could not reverse the trial court. In essence, the trial court determined the amount of mud, rock, and sediment was not so severe as to take the runoff outside the parameters of the common enemy doctrine. There's some exceptions here, but I'll save that till later on. Well, the doctrine seems harsh to the burdened landowner. A guiding precept of the law making it palatable is that it is fair to one as it is to another. Additionally, the doctrine has worked satisfactorily in Indiana since its inception. There have been no changes in the forces that cause water to run downhill. That would be called gravity. They just don't have a legislature like ours. Changes, let's see. Thus, the court sees no reason to change the law that works if imperfectly. So until the forces of gravity cease to exist, the common enemy doctrine will govern whether and how we can deal with excess water. So from what I read in the complaint, in the news story, this is what it was, surface water. This article doesn't say that anyone has a duty to contain surface water, which is what the Attorney General is alleging, but judging on what my understanding of the common enemy doctrine, it doesn't matter. Now, there may be a contractual claim. I'd have to take a look at the contract between KEPCO and I suppose it's the Power Authority, because if there's a contract claim, the government might have something going there. The government in the complaint only mentions that these were requirements, the ponding basins, et cetera, et cetera. So when KEPCO files its motion or files its answer and the words common enemy doctrine come up, tailgaters will be way, way ahead of the game. And when it comes up, my analysis is that there will be screeching and wailing from everywhere, that no one will like this. Because I know what happens here on Guam. I've had people ask me, you know, when so-and-so built next to my house, he built it, he built it up higher, and now all the water runs down to my place and is ruining my yard. What can I do? Well, build some kind of a diversion so it goes to somebody else's yard. Why is that, Bob? It's called the common enemy doctrine.
Right there on Route 15, is it? Back road?
Uh-huh.
By a certain construction or a material provider on Guam.
Uh-huh.
Can we say their name?
Sure.
I think it's Hawaiian Rock, right?
Okay.
They've built along the road, they built, I guess, a mound to protect the rest of the road from what they're doing on the other side.
Uh-huh.
And we all know that when it rains, there's a pond there.
Uh-huh.
It's been there ever since.
Okay.
And I don't think the government's ever done anything about it, probably because they know they can't.
So the water collects into a pond.
Well, on the surface of the road because it has nowhere to go.
Oh,
and it
okay.
runs down that hill and it stays right there.
I see.
Yeah, so that part of back road, when it rains, it's really precarious.
Well, I know what could be done. I hope Johnny Atula is listening today.
I'm almost afraid to ask.
Well, when the Navy pulled out of NAS, they left behind a really nice swimming pool right there by the officers' club. And, of course, nobody maintained it. And everybody's wondering, is the government going to take care? And no one was going to take care of it. So Johnny Atula went in there and put tilapia in the pond and used it for his tilapia pond.
There you go.
So if this pond is relatively stable, are you listening, Johnny Atula? All right. So much for the common enemy doctrine. I've got, hey, drive-through Jack. Drive-through Jack is back. All right. Okay, I want to get into drive-through Jack, but before, so that I don't run out of time like I did last time, I want to call your attention, I'll get to you in a minute, Jack, to the Pacific Island Times August edition. It costs you $1.25, and it's a very good publication. There's a lot of really readable stuff in there. And if you were to turn to page 9, you'd find an article called The Barnes 8, Resolution 56 and the IRS. And there's a picture there of someone that you'll recognize in a heartbeat. It's, considering the raw material, it's a pretty good picture. It's me.
Did you draw that cartoon?
yeah. I'm a really good artist. Yeah. See the cartoon that I drew as part of the illustration of the column. So I'll be writing a column for the Pacific Island Times. So over the weekend, as you're jonesing for tall tales, whip down to Payless or Circle K or someplace, spend $1.25, pick up Pacific Island Times, and this will get you through the weekend. Okay, let's go to Churchill Downs, then we'll come back to Jack.
Now on Guam, 511 Tactical, offering the largest selection of tactical apparel and gear for law enforcement, first responders, tactical operators, and recreational enthusiasts. We're located next to Bargain Tactical, Guam's largest firearms dealer. Find both stores, Route 16 Army Drive between the Dungeon and Little Wangs. Open Monday through Friday, 10 to 7, Saturdays 10 to 5, and closed on Sunday. Visit us online at tacticalgearguam.com. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Tactical Gear Guam. 511 Tactical, now on Guam. Always be ready.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Sir Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and see to us, Mahase.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Boy, talk about a return to normality. Riding down the home stretch of Churchill Downs with Drive-Thru Jack, that's normal. Good afternoon, Drive-Thru Jack. We missed you. We talked about you a lot in your absence.
Oh, well, I feel flattered, I guess, but just to let you know, I had jury duty. I just wanted my term to expire so I didn't have any excuse or anything, but my term has expired, so now I'm a free man. So it was either a choice of, if I was going to give you a clue what I was doing these past couple of weeks, I would say, hey, either I was in prison or I had jury duty, and because you were both sides, I mean, you were director of corrections and you wore the black robe, you probably would say, hey, Jack, that doesn't give me any clue. That clue is about as helpful as a car score in a pandemic. It makes no sense. So, I had jury duty, and I just waited for my term to expire, so I didn't, have any problems.
Jack,
when I went up.
We're going to put the Klitzkie case aside for the moment.
Yeah, let's do that, because I want to talk about the subject that you're talking right now.
Okay, we'll put it aside for the moment, and if we have time, we'll come back to the common enemy doctrine. But first, before your hiatus, you asked me if there was still a mutual consent provision between the United States and the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas. And
yes.
And I said, I never heard of such a thing, Jack, and I don't know. So I went back and did some research, and the answer to your question is there mutual consent provision between the CNMI and the United States. The answer is sort of, and I'll explain. If you were to look at Section 105 of the covenant, it says, the United States may enact legislation in accordance with its constitutional processes, which will be applicable to the Northern Mariana Islands, but if such legislation cannot also be made applicable to the several states, the Northern Mariana Islands must be specifically named therein for it to become effective in the Northern Mariana Islands. That's point one. Second point, in order to respect the right of self-government guaranteed by this covenant, the United States agrees to limit the exercise of that authority so that the fundamental provisions of this covenant, namely Articles 1, 2, and 3, and Sections 501 and 805 may be modified only with the consent of the government of the United States and the government of the Northern Marianas. So the covenant can only, those parts of the covenant can only be changed if the CNMI says it's okay. Interesting, isn't it?
Very, very.
Now,
very.
of course, the real, and I'll get into what those provisions are, but the real test here will be if there is a challenge to see how the courts will handle something like this, to see how the Attorney General of the United States will handle it and how the courts will handle it. Because in 1952, when Puerto Rico became a covenant, a commonwealth, they tried something like this, and it lasted up until somebody decided that the Department of Justice would challenge it. And when it's all over, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico is no different than the territory of Guam. So let me tell you what Articles 1, 2, and 3 say. Article 1 is the article which contains that provision. And Article 1 spells out the political relationship between the CNMI and the United States. It's 5 sections long. Article 2 is the Constitution of the Northern Mariana Islands. Article 3 deals with citizenship and nationality. And Section 5.
So would you say that it's a priority numeration?
Let me find this other section here. Section 805 deals with land. That's a restrictive, land restricted to citizens of the Northern Marianas Descent that I've talked about on many occasions as something that would not pass muster in the 50 states, but does pass muster in the CNMI because it's included in the covenant. And then
So would you say that it's a list of a priority list? In other words, the first one mentioned is a priority, and then it goes less. It goes in less significance as it goes down the list. Or
No. It just says it just that the two name sections in the first 3 articles of the covenant can't be changed unless the Northern Marianas goes along with it.
Got it.
So that is a form of mutual consent, perhaps the smallest amount of mutual consent you could have, but for the United States government, a gigantic concession, because they're all their magic Article 4, Section 3 powers. Unless, again, a lot will depend on how the courts handle this. And I have a book written by Arnold Leibowitz. It's as thick as the Montgomery Ward catalog, and he goes into this. And the courts have not fallen in line with a lot of the stuff in the covenant the way you might think that they would. So far, nothing of any major importance. But something that has to be taken into consideration.
Well, it plays in the theme about territorial status when you always mention that. Well, if states had to choose between becoming a state and becoming a territory, they would choose the territorial status because of the type of governmental freedom, not necessarily people freedom, but the type of institutional government freedom that comes with the territories. I mean, everybody, like you said, most people, most complainers that complain about the territories being, insubordinate or inferior. But, when you ask other states, the 50 states, they say, hey, man, you guys got some things we wish we had. But anyways, everything you've said so far, I agree. But can I chime in a little bit about what you were talking about, the issue that you had earlier about the water, stuff like that?
Certainly.
Okay. Historically, this is the way I understood it. This was many years ago, that we have the Mississippi River, and to the east of the Mississippi River, they had what they called riparian rights. And I think that's the thing that you were discussing about earlier. But
no, it's not. But go on.
Yeah, but to the west of the Mississippi, they have appropriation rights. So, like, when you're out west, like in California and all those states, the states that are arguing over water rights that comes out of the Rocky Mountains, they're arguing over who gets the water and stuff like that. And when the rain falls, who owns the water? On east of the Mississippi, they had riparian rights, so it's the landowner that wherever the water fell, it was theirs. And
or if you live next to the river, you could take water from the river and irrigate your farm with it.
Exactly, but when you go to the appropriation states, which are west of the Mississippi, where water is scarce, guess what? It changes. So if a trickle of water and it forms a natural stream and that stream dries up, or a thimble of water that runs through your property and you divert that, it starts up at your end and you divert that, you could, be sued and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that goes into those things. And just letting you know I'm back, and I'll be listening in to you. And
okay. Well, enjoy your fish wish, Jack.
Yeah, okay, bye.
See you later. That's it for this week.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Keep working remotely. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. That recommendation from the director of the National Institutes of Health for companies whose employees are still working away from the office.
If you want to try to keep your employees safe, this may not be a moment to begin to make a change about bringing people back to work if they can still safely telecommute, which a lot of people have been doing.
Dr. Francis Collins telling Fox's Your World with Neil Cavuto, if you're not vaccinated, the Delta variant of the coronavirus is looking for you. The Biden administration says there are numbers to support that.
White House officials say 7 states now with the lowest vaccination rates account for about half of new infections and hospitalizations over the last week. Florida and Texas alone make up about 1/3. Health officials say vaccines remain the best line of defense against new variants.
Fox's Aisha Hasni, another vaccine mandate, this one in California, where the health department says more than 2 million healthcare workers must be inoculated by the end of next month. The Washington Post reports the administration is considering using the threat of withholding federal funds as a way to pressure agencies from healthcare to education to mandate vaccinations for employees or students. The Congressional Gold Medal, that is, will be awarded in the name of the police officers who defended the U.S. Capitol building in January.
During a ceremony in the Rose Garden, the president expressed appreciation for members of the Capitol and Metropolitan Police Departments and signed legislation striking 4 congressional gold medals in their honor.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for protecting our Capitol. Maybe even more importantly, for protecting our Constitution.
The medals will go on display at the U.S. Capitol, the Capitol Police Headquarters, the D.C. Police Department, and the Smithsonian.
Fox's Rachel Sutherland. America is listening to Fox News.
Get all of your favorite Fox News podcasts ad-free on Apple Podcasts with Fox News Podcasts Plus. From Trey Gowdy, the Fox News Rundown, Will Kane, Brian Kilmeade, and so much more. Go to foxnewspodcasts.com for all the details. The Fox News Rundown. Start your day with a contrast of perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. A daily morning podcast going far beyond the headlines, featuring insight from top newsmakers, reporters, and Fox News contributors. Listen and subscribe now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com. New from the Fox News Podcasts Network, Dana Perino, co-host of The 5 and America's Newsroom on Fox News Channel, returns to the world of audio with a new limited-time podcast, Everything Will Be Okay with Dana Perino. Building off the success of her best-selling book of the same name, Dana provides an unequaled brand of advice built on real-life experience and interviews experts and individuals that make a difference in the lives of others. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
The U.S. Senate last night was unable to debate and vote on all of the amendments proposed to the $1 trillion infrastructure bill. They'll be back at it on Saturday.
No votes are expected today in the U.S. Senate, allowing many senators from both parties to attend the Wyoming funeral of former Republican Senator Mike Enzi. Enzi retired from the Senate this year after a 24-year career in the chamber. He died July 26 after a serious bicycle accident near his home in Wyoming. He was 77 years old. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell remembered Enzi as hugely accomplished but humble. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said Enzi was kind and gentle, principled, and sought common ground. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
The Coast Guard says there are no survivors in the wreckage of a sightseeing plane that went missing Thursday morning in Alaska and was found hours later. The plane carried a pilot and 5 passengers from a cruise ship that had docked in Ketchikan. The murder conviction of former Dallas police officer Amber Geiger has been upheld by a Texas appeals court. She'd shot and killed her neighbor after mistakenly entering his apartment instead of hers and thinking him to be a burglar. Wildfires continue to scorch hundreds of acres in the west.
64 large fires are burning in the western U.S. According to the National Interagency Fire Center, the Bootleg Fire in south central Oregon is the largest. It's grown to more than 388,000 acres. It's burned at least 70 homes and more than 100 other structures. New evacuations have been ordered for people living near the Tamarack Fire east of Sacramento in California. It's burning in federal forest and has grown quickly to nearly 40,000 acres. Crews expect thunderstorms that could bring some rain, but also lightning, which is what started this fire.